Welcome, Alex. So happy to have you here for our joint event today.
Dimi, it's fantastic to be with you. Thank you so much for organizing this together. As you know, at Optimising, we love DEPT. We love working with you together, and I think we have a very joint view and vision of the future.
Hey, and it's especially after the past 18 months, it's very logical that we're doing this like this, right? With you in New York, myself being in Amsterdam. Unfortunately, it's the case, but I guess we're used to it now, right?
I agree with you. The world has changed. I do think that, especially when it comes to events, people want to start to be back in person together, but it's very, very obvious that digital is not going anywhere. It just accelerates. So I am used to it, and I know you too as well.
All right, so Alex, I would love to kind of shoot you a few rapid fire questions, see what comes out of it. It'll go from left to right, but let's see what happens. So the first one, because you got to start easy, right? Very easy. Is it cloud or on-premise?
Cloud.
There you go. And of course, with you being from Europe, but now being in the US, is it Europe or is it the US?
It's absolutely New York City for me because it actually brings together the best of Europe and the US.
That's that's a very smart answer, I think. Hey, and as I heard from you before, I think you really like tennis. So we got to get into the who's the GOAT debate. So is it Federer, is it Nadal, or is it Djokovic? Bring it on.
I actually think it's Nadal for winning so many French Opens in a row, and also having had some of the best matches against the other two. But it's an unbelievable time we live through with three exceptional athletes. It's unbelievable.
100%. Yeah. So I think it's debatable. What I always like about the about this debate, because I'm also somewhat of a tennis fan myself, and you can actually pull that into other sports and other things, and actually into our work as well, is the interesting dynamic of Nadal being probably the less gifted one of the three, but through sheer hard work and smartness and sort of dedication and continuously going for it, actually achieving something that from a talent perspective wasn't in his cards, so to say. So I really like that, and I think it's actually a good example for a lot of us and a lot of our people in our companies, because it's the difference between sort of where you start and where you end up, purely because of what you do.
Totally agreed. Totally agreed.
Cool. Hey, and then another one, and maybe a bit more for Optimizely. Industry focus or more solution focus?
I think it's actually a little bit more solution focused relative to what we do. There's obviously industry flavors to it, but I do think that the solution side, in terms of really bringing intelligence into our solutions, that's really been our main focus, benefiting all industries.
Cool. Hey, and then a controversial one. Your life savings, do they go into the bank or do you put it all into crypto?
They will over time more and more end up, I guess, in crypto. That's probably the reality. But I need to figure out which cryptocurrency is the one to put the money in.
Exactly. Well, just as a very blatant advertising point, we just created the first open source NFT marketplace on Algorand, which we think is a crypto that people should, if you want to go for someone, go for that one. I think it's also relatively good for the environment, so that's a pure win. Hey, and then this one's going to be tough. Data or tech?
I think actually now the conversation is going towards a bit more towards data. I think the level of change and the level of power that you can get through data is still, is very high. I think the tech, there's a lot of great tech, but I do think that data can be a significant differentiator for companies.
Yeah, 100%. I think the although tech is not always good, but tech is probably more of a commodity, and especially I think for our clients, the data piece is where they can really put themselves apart from the competition, right? That is where they can accelerate upon the tech stack and the creativity, etc., I would say. As we are approaching the end of the year, how has this slightly weird year been for you guys at Optimizely?
Dimi, we had a great year, and we're obviously in the close of 2021. But when I think about this year, I think a lot about hope and optimism. I do think that, obviously the advent of the vaccination, the ability to actually start to engage with people again differently really has helped obviously humanity to move forward. But from a business perspective though, I think a lot of the things that have happened over the last 18, 24 months speak to the fact that companies have recognized can actually move a lot faster and actually accelerate their initiatives if there's enough will and urgency. And so what has been great this year has been all the conversations I've had with, C-level executives talking about their initiatives in their business to become more data-driven, to drive outcomes for their business, and ultimately to really understand digital and, for instance, e-commerce, not just as another channel, but really as understanding it as a core of their business. And a lot of companies, are now building product teams, working together with the marketing teams on their digital transformation. And I know you and I share a lot of customers who are going through this transformation with us together. And I think it's great to see that.
Hey, I love to just sort of get into the meat of everything immediately. So maybe when it comes to that digital transformation and especially the data-driven part, of course, super important for both our businesses and most important for our clients. Can you speak a bit about what your product, what your stack has developed like over the past year?
Yeah, so we start everything, Dimi, at outcome. And when I speak to customers, they want to drive higher convergence, they want to drive more revenue, they want to do this at a lower acquisition cost, and ultimately they want to drive a return of investment for their business. There's a gap between what customers want from a brand digitally and what they actually get. And so what we, technology perspective, inside our digital experience platform, is really bring together the creation aspect of content and commerce together with the optimization aspect. And this means that anytime you create any sort of content, you should actually be thinking about enough of on your site versus where do you need more of. But then when you create the experiences, you want to use data and actually understand the customer behavior to start personalizing and making the experience as optimal as possible. And one of the best ways to do this, especially for marketing and product teams, is to study the behavior of customers through experimentation. And we believe very much that it's not enough to just ask people what they want. You really need to observe them when they engage with your site. And a lot of this is, for me, not just about the technology. You've built a great stack around content management, commerce, experimentation, personalization. And I like to say we have the biggest breadth, but also the intelligence in our solutions. But what is so important is really the adoption inside a company, working with teams, obviously, to make certain that the solutions are being leveraged. And that's why a partnership like with DEPT is so important to us, Dimi, and that's a work that we love to do, is to see obviously customers drive these outcomes and jointly bring together creativity, data, as well as the technology to drive these outcomes for their business.
Hey, and Alex, speaking about that change in dynamic, and as you know, the whole bringing together of creativity, tech, and data is right up our alley, right? It's what we believe in. If you truly want to transform your business, you cannot do one or two of the three. You need to bring it together. Can you speak a bit about what you are seeing also on the client side being needed from a team perspective? Because I think that's a very interesting one, right? Where in the past you might have had sort of separate, let's say, software that you were using. Now it's really what we always like to say about people, process, and technology. So it's a lot about sort of, hey, how do you as a brand take the stack? How do you take your team? How do you work together with your partners? Can you speak a bit about how you see it at clients and also how you adapt the Optimizely ecosystem to that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dimi. I would say two things. First, one, I give you an example. I had a conversation with a very large insurance company, and they really had this eureka moment, this moment of great revelation, when they recognized that they could no longer just ask customers to do business with them as they wanted, but they needed to adapt to how the customers wanted to do business with them. And I think that's a really important realization, is that as a brand, you need to adapt to your customer. You can no longer just say to the customer, oh, come to this branch between these hours, or use this mobile app and use it this way. You need to be very adaptive to the needs of your customers. And ultimately, that's what we want to achieve with our technology, is to help companies adapt to how the customers want to ultimately engage with their brands. Now, in order to accomplish this, and to your question, I believe that today, lots of organizations, I see it across retail, I see it in financial services, are building teams with very different skill sets between marketing, which was maybe traditionally demand gen and brand focused, to becoming a lot more data science focused, but also in terms of really looking at the digital experience as a complex product development project. Because a lot of times, what you're actually now building is really a product which drives demand, which drives business results. And you need to have a product mindset in terms of releases, in terms of how you actually take an agile approach. And so I work with quite a number of customers where I see a big cultural change. Companies moving away from just being, oh, this is purely a marketing-driven initiative, to really saying like, look, we need to bring marketing and products together. So for me, it's much more about less being trend-focused, but it really is about inside your company to have the ability to be agile and be able to adjust based on the behaviors that your companies exhibit. And this is why we believe it's so important, for instance, to use testing and experimentation as part of the way you create and optimize your digital experiences. So it's really about that capability in your business to deal with trends, rather than just chasing the trend for the trend's sake. And that's what we want to ultimately enable through our platform. We have some solutions that are targeted entirely at the marketeer around being able to create, for instance, your own experiments without any technical support. But then on the other hand, we also have capabilities, where product and developers can leverage feature flags and can actually go into the code really as a platform to create the scenarios that they want. And being able to bring both product and marketing teams on one platform is essential for us. And I would be curious, Dimi, do you see the same with your customers that you speak to?
Yeah, I think, Alex, this is, I think, exactly what the big shift is, right? That whereas, let's say, 8 years ago, you very clearly had sort of, let's say, the CMO column within companies, and then the CIO or CTO column. And it was basically sort of, hey, here's my marketing. It's happening in this realm. It's a strong team. They do everything which is needed. A lot, of course, on let's say, client acquisition, stuff like that. And then on the other hand, you had the IT systems, which was mainly sort of back-end. And what we've seen is that the interesting bit is, the brands that win are the ones where you can really work in a symbiosis. So where you can make sure that, you're sort of breaking through the silos, talking to both the CIO and the CMO, bringing those teams together and really leveraging both the technology as well as the insights from the data across the full digital customer journey. And I think that, we're fortunate enough that, since our inception, we've always had that 50-50 mix. So 50% people who focus squarely on marketing, everything around creative, growth, etc. And then the other 50% being focused squarely on tech. What does the experience look like? How do we build the stack? How do we do the connections to all the systems behind it? How do we even build those backend systems? So I think it's, seeing a company like Optimizely also integrate basically the full stack across the customer journey is right in our wheelhouse, and also makes it simpler for us to kind of execute on this for our clients.
I would be curious, in terms of our partnership, to learn a little bit about how are you scaling the capabilities at DEPT to keep up with that, because that's obviously multiple different profiles that you need in terms of being both data driven, both creative, and then obviously also tech minded. How did you build that?
Yeah, it's. I think that we've grown pretty fast over the past few years, and the focus we've always had is, hey, let's skew or let's gravitate everything towards what the client needs, and that's also where our idea has been born. Right, way back in the day, we were just focusing on the tech bit, on the platform bit, and it was based on the questions of our clients where we saw this evolution towards the fully integrated digital experience. So when we build it based off of that idea, we always said, hey, we want to grow fast. We want to do it in two ways. One is organically grow basically with the clients that we have, and the other part is inorganically. So we have, and I think we can kind of meet each other there as companies, we have the idea that, hey, if you want to do something absolutely top notch, or you want to go into a market and really perform there on a top notch level, you cannot always build it organically yourself. So you need to find sort of like-minded, in our case, agencies, in your case, tech platforms that align both from a capability, from a cultural, and from a strategic perspective. So that is the way that we grow the business. Of course, bring it all into one team, right? It's super important. And again, I see some parallels here. That when a client works with us, that it's one team. It doesn't matter where people come from. They have the one person responsible for the client. You have one person responsible for the strategy, for the process, and making sure that you can truly leverage the best of DEPT from across the different regions and from across the different capabilities. And maybe, and I'd be super interested in hearing your views about it as well. The big challenge, of course, at the moment being, hey, where do you find all those people to do that really good work, right? Where do you find the top-notch people? And I think over the past year, we've had a lot of, how do you say that? It has worked well for us that we have always worked integrated and internationally. So instead of having to kind of fish out of one pond, we were able to just say, hey, if we need more people in our data team, let's just find them anywhere where they sit across the different regions and bring them into the teams, which are working in a distributed way anyway. Hey, and Alex, of course, you just announced some very exciting news about a new acquisition you've done. Can you share with us why this is super exciting for you and most definitely for your customers?
We're very excited about this acquisition because we very much believe, Dimi, that a great digital experience needs to be connected to a great marketeer experience. And this acquisition brings together an absolutely leading workflow and digital asset management capabilities together with the Optimize the platform around digital experiences. And we have so many marketeers who need to get their job done now remotely. So connecting the marketeer around driving a joint outcome is super, super important. And so we believe that the entire process of creating, optimizing content and experiences will become much, much simpler through the combination of our companies. And I'm very excited to share more in the next couple of days with you, our customers, and obviously our consumers. So thank you so much for asking the question.
Yeah, I really like the fact that you brought up the flexibility bit. I think that when you look at our clients being successful, they do it with an ecosystem around them. Tech vendors, might be agencies, consultancies, etc. And the philosophy there is always important, right? Each company is different, and you kind of need to make sure that you think about things in the same way. And when it comes to that flexibility, the interesting bit is and I don't know if I'm going to offend you now, but if I would look back sort of, 3-4 years, then Optimizely, or the Episerver as a part of it was called back then, was, I think, more interpreted as, let's say, a proponent of the monolith type of platform, right? And if you look at the past few years, I think the development that you've had and the approach also in looking at the world in terms of, hey, it's much more full customer journey, best of breed, connected together in a smart way without it all being sort of crammed together. I think it's super interesting to also, I think, for our joint clients and for potential clients to kind of hear what your philosophy is there, because it's so important to align on those when you work together.
Absolutely, Dimi. So first of all, you don't insult me because I've only been CEO at Optimising and formerly Episerver for 2 years. So 4 years is okay.
Oh, there you go.
but more importantly, my mindset, and I've been now also nearly 2 decades in the industry, has always been that we live in a very heterogeneous world. There's lots of great solutions out there, et cetera. And I think in many perspectives, obviously, new architectures, be it APIs, microservices, et cetera, has allowed for a lot more composability in terms of how solutions come together in the tech stack. What I do find is that some companies prefer, obviously, seeing that certain vendors bring certain sets of capabilities together. At Optimizely, we think a lot about how to best support our customers in terms of not just creating the right content for the right customer, so how can you continuously optimize the digital experience? So what we have done is we've really taken a view of a very strong content focus and commerce and our CMS and commerce capabilities for the past years, invested heavily in terms of better being able to recommend, personalize, and optimize content and commerce activities. And that's how we build out our stack to be both composable, but also be integrated in terms of helping customers understand their customer data better and be able to then create and optimize the right digital experiences. I work with a lot of customers together who have 100,000 pieces of content. What content is relevant for which you start to personalize your experience even before a customer has registered with you on their site? How can you actually start to test new concepts quickly to see how customers' behaviors change over time? So what we've really invested in is both the breadth of our capabilities relative to digital, but more importantly, inject intelligence through data across the entire platform. And I believe this is also the connective tissue between us at Optimized and DEPT, because we very much believe that a digital experience is both creative, but it's also tech-driven, and it's more and more data-driven. And what ultimately matters to customers is the business outcome. Can I grow revenue? Can I lower the cost of customer acquisition? And can I create a great customer experience so that my customers come back?
And maybe, Alex, if there's one thing that I can follow up here, I think a lot of our sort of joint focus, especially from the, let's say, marketing side, is of course on customer acquisition, whilst we actually all sort of are aware of the fact that, customer lifetime value is sort of the, it's maybe the golden goose of everything. Because if you get that right, and if you keep those clients in and you sort of build out, that's when you're really successful as a business. And maybe you can speak a bit about not so much, let's say, the acquisition of customers, but far more sort of how do you, from within Optimizely, look at helping our customers, making sure that customer lifetime value for their customers goes up.
Dimi, that's a great question, because I think so much about it is obviously creating a sense of customer loyalty and having customers really come back. And if I look at our customers in the industry, there is some industry-specific flavor to the question, but a lot of things start with engaging the customer in the way they want to be engaged with, and obviously being able to actually understand the customer needs better and better. And I think that's why, for instance, we have invested quite significantly into our customer data strategy. If you see, for instance, that a customer is starting to churn, how can you start to provide the right offers or the right personalized outreach to re-engage this customer? How do you even know that a customer is likely to churn? So those are the type of problem statements we are working on solving for our customers by using our technology. But I think this notion about customer lifetime value, re-engaging with customers that are at risk, being able to actually have data drive that rather than assumptions about who might be at risk, those are the type of things that you can solve today through Optimizely, and where we absolutely have our focus on, because it is so much cheaper in some ways to hold a customer rather than acquire a new customer. And especially in digital, you need to be able to scale that outcome. So it's a very exciting part.
Yeah, and what we from our side in working with clients love is that, the tech and the data that we get from a platform like Optimizely enables us to really help a client on that side, so on that customer lifetime value. And let's say the challenge for us is, how do we ensure that the client understands that to actually execute on everything you just said, you need all that content, right? All that micro content. What does the text message look like? What does the email look like? What the moment that person comes back to the website or to the app, how is the interaction? And I think that we've seen that, in getting that right, that's where as a business you can make a huge difference, because that part of working with existing customers, making sure they don't churn, etc., is not something that brands are super strong in across the board. So if you do it right as a brand, you can really stand out and win keep a lot of clients and therefore win in the market. If you look at the vision for the future you just talked about, what are the things that worry you, or at least what are the things that keep you up at night in terms of, hey, are we able to continuously kind of perform on this for our clients? What are the key things where you think, hey, this is where we really need to step up?
It's mainly about adoption, sense of urgency, and moving things forward. I do think we live in a world of have and have nots in some ways when it comes to digital. Some companies make all the decisions based on assumptions. They, I think, we're moving way too slowly when it comes to digital. And my talk track is always the same with when I speak to customers, which is, time is today the great enemy. It's not trying to be perfect. It's about being good enough so that you can actually start moving your business forward. Because today, revenue growth is directly related to your ability to scale digitally. And if you fall behind, the gap to your competition is just increasing. And think about how many new brands have come up in the last couple of years that were digitally only, and they have captured so much market share from brands that were very, very well known. And so the biggest thing that keeps me up, Dimi, is how to express to companies and how to get them started faster so they're not losing so much time relative to the competition. It's unbelievable that 4 companies in the United States make up 20% of the GDP. And those companies only get smarter because they collect more data every single day. And if you are a brand competing with them, you have to get going. And so that's, for me, one of the things that keeps me up.
You just mentioned sort of the big 4 companies in the US that own 20% of the GDP. I think one of the things that, and especially one of them with the rebrand from Facebook to Meta, is really focusing on is, hey, what is that sort of next iteration of either the internet as we know it, or however you want to call it? So sort of the Metaverse, which is kind of closely connected to, the blockchain, crypto, NFT, all that kind of good stuff. I'd be super interested in, when we work with our clients, the bread and butter, the focus to get the results that you spoke about before is definitely in the here and the now. But I'd be interested to hear what your view is on that next iteration of the internet and how Optimizely wants to move on that.
Yeah, it's a great question, Dimi. I wish I had obviously a crystal ball and could tell you, but in my view, certain changes, like for instance, if you think digital currencies, will continue to accelerate and move forward. I mean, I think sometimes we overestimate change in the short term because it's not going to change within 12 or 24 months, but we underestimate how much it's changing, let's say, in 10 or 20 years. And even if I think about today compared to, let's say, in 2000, I remember when people said like, oh, the only thing you could sell online is books. And today people buy cars without ever seeing them online, or seeing them in person. I mean, every product can be sold today online. And I think the same happens with digital currencies, for instance. You, in the beginning, believe like, oh, it's just it's just a new thing that will go. And then over time, you will see that it becomes part of your digital wallet. Suddenly companies like PayPal and others actually adopt it. And before you know it, it becomes a new standard. And so I think there's certainly a certain inevitability around that things will become something in the future. Now, I do think that when it comes to companies dealing with this, anytime I think you face uncertainty, there's an antidote to facing uncertainty. And that's taking an experimentation mindset. What do you do when you face something that you don't know the answer to? Is you need to test it. That's how we learn. That's how children learn. And one of the ways to do this is obviously, for instance, as brands, you might want to provide a digital, let's say a Bitcoin checkout option. And then you can see, will people go there or not? What's the adoption of it or not? But the thing that you need to get to is you need to be able to set up these projects not as like, oh, this is going to take us 18 months and hundreds of resources. You need to find ways to do this in a smarter and shorter way so that you can actually test the outcomes.
There you go. Well, Alex, I really want to thank you for joining us today. It was awesome to catch up as always. Maybe as one last question, any final thoughts you want to leave our audience with?
I think, Dimi, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really believe this partnership is really all in service of customers to become more creative, to leverage the best technology, and ultimately gain superior outcomes through data. I think our abilities to help companies adapt and continue to be adapting to the ever-changing market, that's what this is all about. And I think this event is hopefully helpful to customers and prospects in their want to digitally transform. And so thank you, Dimi, for having me.
Awesome, thanks. Well, I hope you have a great day and we'll definitely speak soon.
Thanks, Dimi. Same to you.